listen to it, it was it was really amazing to do that because I've never done it. And
Wow.
I describe it as baby Laura, you know.
Yeah, but so what do you hear that you think you've changed now and or you like more then and now? I mean, that's kind of an interesting topic since it's something we all go through. I mean, you know, what
I
did you like about it?
Well, I mean, there were good things and there were things. Wow, really? I mean, it's so
Uh-huh.
dull. That's what I kept thinking. Oh my goodness, this that's such a special note. Why didn't you do a little more on that note?
It's great.
Um, so it was the knowledge, it was the living with it. It
Mm-hmm.
was, as we all know, great art. Oh my goodness, the Mozart Concerto. I mean, for me, that's a piece I put away for about 10 years. I really tried not to work on it with my students too much. And so then when I came back to it, it was really, really a new work for me. So listening to that, I just kept thinking, Mozart. I mean, that's the thing. My young students will say, "Oh, this is boring," and I'm just, ugh, are you kidding?
Now, I misspoke earlier. You did the Copeland with Dmitri Ashkenazi, right? Is that you did the Copeland recording?
I did do a Copland recording, which that was the piece I used to listen to as a kid nonstop.
Uh-huh. Oh, cool.
You did the Brahms. Well, would listen to the symphonies, but Benny Goodman's recording,
Yeah.
that opening, everybody loves it, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So I finally did get to record that, which was kind of a horrible experience, but it was.
Yeah. What's it like to record that as opposed to playing it live?
Oh, it was just that we had been recording with Telar quite a bit with the symphony. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
we recorded all this big stuff in
Yeah.
2 or 3 years. And this was uh, Naxos, and so it was a really different thing. I think we did about 5 live performances that felt terrific. And then when the recording came, it was like they put the mic right up my bell, and
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
it was just not what I was expecting. But I'm certainly glad I got to play that piece as many
Yeah.
times as I did.
How was
So,
it working with Robert Shaw?
oh, he was like my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He really was, and he was here a long time, and the orchestra I think was probably ready to have
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
change. But speaking of not being a fast learner particularly, and what is this in relation to? I don't know, but he was so hard on himself, and
Mm.
he studied nonstop. There's a famous story of him conducting when we were on tour, and he wasn't happy with the way he conducted, and there were these back doors, and he left right after the applause, and no one saw him for 3 days.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Left his car. He was just very, very self-critical and very humble. But I think it was that vulnerability, really,
Wow.
that his vulnerability and his need to produce, which is what really drew people in.
Amazing. I
So,
was really lucky to have done the Brahms Requiem with him in a like all-state program in Texas where I grew up in high school, and it was really, I mean, I'll never forget it. He was really sweet and incredibly uh, giving to the orchestra. It was really, really amazing. Yeah.
well, he would take a high school glee club when we were on tour, and in 2 hours, completely change them. That was what was so amazing.
Wow.
What he could do with voices. So,
Wow. Well, speaking about conductors, I mean, I'm sure they have a huge effect on what you do in your life in the orchestra and that sort of thing. But can you speak a little bit about kind of, going back to my other question of what kind of changes you've felt over the years, just in sort of even the team, like, when people come into the orchestra that are new and what kind of adjustments that people have to make, as a team to as a player, like not so much in any other way except just to ask about the kind of adjustments you may make as a player when you're working with new folks.
um, I've been lucky enough to have 3 music directors so different, all of them. And yes, that impacts your playing greatly because depending on their need to manage
Mm-hmm.
and control their solo players,
Mm.
some don't control at all, and others try to dictate the
Uh-huh.
solo to you, which is very difficult. And I've always tried to stay as open as possible and always be learning.
Mm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But as the years go on and you've made these pieces your own,
Right, 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 right.
which I think is why conductors really prefer to hire, a kind of a clean slate. And
Uh-huh.
I'm certainly seeing that now. Although now that I'm on this end of it, I want to say, I'm actually more flexible than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
so I really enjoy it when a guest conductor will come in or a different music director and make me think about something very differently. The team that you're playing with is everything.
Mm.
The woodwind section.
Mm.
It's everything. I mean, if you go and listen to those old Cleveland Orchestra recordings, oh my God, that wind section was
Yeah.
just fantastic.
Yeah.
And we've had weak players in the section, and now we have this new crop of just unbelievable wind section now. I just feel really blessed. But the interesting thing about playing in a wind section for that many years, when I first came into the orchestra and it'd be Galanta dances or some really huge, beautiful Rachmaninoff solo, those you have to really rise. But now that I'm an older player, I actually enjoy the team aspect of it
Mm.
even more than the solos
Oh,
sometimes.
interesting. Uh-huh.
Because that thing we can create together, that means that we're active participants every second of that
Yeah.
music making.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when I was a younger player, I really focused on just the solos, and I would sort of play the tuties and try to be okay.
Right.
But now, if underneath somebody else's solo, if I can be really sensitive and help them, I get
Mm-hmm.
really, really great pleasure out of that now.
Well, that's actually interesting. You mentioned Cleveland and playing underneath the other solos. I mean, I think it was one of my teachers along the way that said the hardest job is playing second clarinet, and the hardest job is because you're matching so many different people at the same time, and you're balancing your your volumes and your articulations and your pitch levels and things like this. And I mean, what is that? How you see it as well? I mean, how do you see the different positions of the clarinet section?
Boy, well, you played second clarinet in Cleveland for
A little bit,
many
yeah,
years.
yeah. There was a number of years there where I was playing in there with various changes of the subbing and I think Dan Gilbert moved to play bass for some time when Linnea was out with some injuries and things like that. So yeah, there was a number of years there. It was I think the first time was I think it was like a last minute call, like the 4 o'clock. Okay, I got to get in the car and drive to Columbus for an 8 o'clock concert, and something obscure, like I don't know. I think it was like Bruckner five or I don't remember. It was like something like nobody in the clarinet section knew, but everybody in the brass section knew. you those pieces. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was like, super stressful, but it was a lot of fun. And I mean, I learned a lot. I always went into that situation with the biggest ears because I was so curious about how everything was working. And I'm much more of that observer type of player. And I learned a lot. It was really interesting. So, I mean, I find the second clarinet part challenging in so many awareness ways.
Oh, you're totally in the middle, like you said, and you have to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
And you don't get any of the stand well you do, but not as much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really, I've never really played second, only in a
Uh-huh.
pinch, and I'm
Uh-huh.
kind of sorry because I think that would be really fun now.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I do think it's one of the hardest jobs, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just going to ask, have you ever been a player with nerves?
Is there one that doesn't have nerves?
Well, I mean, some people do, some people don't. I mean, I think
I
with
think they're lying.
well, the difference in like, nerves that create issues and nerves that create excitement. Like I think everyone wants to have the excitement nerves because I think if you don't have that, you should probably worry that that you don't have. But
Well, that's when I get worried, don't you? If you're not nervous before,
yeah,
like something
I
big.
think nerves and excitement, like getting excited for something, and I think is amazing. Nerves, I guess, is what to me, and students who are not as experienced as some others that get in front of a lot of folks and get so freaked out that they start like shaking and physical things start to happen. And I just was curious if you've seen that in yourself and or students and have ways that you combat that problem.
Um, I had a period right in Juilliard uh, where I had a lot of shaking,
Mm.
and I can't explain. That was an insecurity of something. Um, and then the worst time for me is when I haven't taken something seriously, or it's a really easy passage.
Hmm.
It's always the way. I don't think I've ever. I can't think of anything I've really messed up that I was afraid of beforehand. So, oh, there's that silly movie Pushing Tin, and there's a at the very beginning it says you land a million planes safely, in one midair crash. That's all they can talk about.
That's hilarious.
So sometimes after playing principal clarinet for 30 something years, something like that happens. I think of it, but um, for me, ritual really helps.
Mm.
I really have to have a ritual before I play. It, it, I have to have a tiny nap so
Uh
I can
huh.
close my eyes.
Yeah.
And just the kind of getting dressed and sort of physically presented
Uh huh.
really focuses me. I mean, I've been doing it a long time, so
Yeah.
you know. And I think if you're not, for me, I'm very physical. I have to exercise. If
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I start to get really like my body's not working
Mm-hmm.
efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And more milk.
Nice. Well, everybody's got their thing, I mean, I think it's interesting after so many years you get used to it, and I think you, I probably wasn't even planned. It's just something that happened, and it sort of evolved, and you sort of adjusted it, as you
Yeah.
as you did it more and more and more, and it felt good to do it that way. I mean, some people have, wear the same shoes, or has to be a certain kind of tie, or I mean, there's.
Well, and I know there's a lot because I had a student last year that actually asked me if I took enderal,
Oh, uh huh.
and she said she wanted to take it and how could I help her to get some? And
Mm.
I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that a lot of people use it in the performing arts period, and I
Mm.
don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to use once in a while
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the doctors. But I think I, I've known a lot of people to take it all the time, and I
Mm-hmm.
just think it makes them dull.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I really wouldn't recommend that as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes there are periods where people have to get over something, and that might be something to consider. But
I,
if you're
I
getting
I was just gonna say I've seen a lot of people over the years who, have no nerves whatsoever, and something can happen all of a sudden, life change or something happens in your life, and suddenly that feels different, and so it can be an issue for anyone at any time of their life, and so I think it's good to have routine because I think the routine is probably um,
well, and the
to
preparation routine, of course,
yeah.
when you're practicing, and I'm sure you do this with your students, play it as many times in front of anybody, as soon as you have another set of eyes on you, you're distracted and you're not thinking about it. You have to learn how to make your bubble. That
Yeah,
that's that's a
that's
really
good.
big thing. I have a bubble that I put myself in that
Yeah,
protects me.
that's cool. That's good. I know it's true. It's true. And I'm sure we all have that, and yeah, that's awesome. The bubble, I love it. Um, well, so tell me about like if you're now you're looking at your career and the things that you've gone through to get to the point that you are now as as a seasoned player. And I've been asking everyone this question. Um, have you discovered anything about ways that you play the instrument that really are the way that you sort of discovered along the way, and maybe techniques that you don't even or you didn't realize that you did this before, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, I didn't realize I did that, and so now you're starting to teach that with your students, or are there anything that you didn't learn from, former teachers, things like that?
Um, I feel a little self-taught.
Okay.
I'm a little jealous of Anthony McGill because he had a great teacher like you.
Believe me, he didn't need that guy.
That guy didn't need anything. Yeah.
At
Well,
14, he was pretty astounding.
I'm sure he was, but everybody needs to be focused in a certain way. My teacher, Roger, was very, very old school. He studied with Daniel Bernard,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so we did the Rose Etudes and all the books, the Behrman, all of that. But his big thing was projecting out.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really big thing with him, which in today's world, I mean, now that we're working with mics and, it's just a
Mm-hmm.
whole new world that you don't have to project that much all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, when you have equipment to do that, it's generally pretty resistant
Mm-hmm.
and harder to do more subtle things. So I think that I've really learned that equipment makes a huge, huge difference. And you have to balance your search for the right equipment because obviously that drives everybody crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As something I've been doing all my life. And I think that at different times in my life, I've prioritized different kinds of playing or what I want out of it. I always want line,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes I don't always want to have a super heavy tone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to always want to have a super heavy tone all the time. I wanted the same sound for everything. And now I want a different sound for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll change equipment to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even though it still sounds like me, it's a little
Mm-hmm.
lighter, it's a little. So I try to get the students, first of all, and any mature musician wants them to have their own voice musically. And they're always going to have a kind of sound that is their voice. But they need to know that they have to change it up a little bit too.
Mm.
You're not going to play your Mahler reed on the Mozart, right? On
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
Kegelstadt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just not going to do that. And, I mean, I have my Lumiere clarinets here. I am just so blessed to have spent some time with Maury Bukunin,
Mm.
and he will work with me endlessly to get things the way that I want them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's a luxury that I have now that I wouldn't have had as a student.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's really making me rethink um, production for specific pieces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Going
I'm
back to what
excited.
yeah, so talking about, playing Mahler and Kegelstadt. So what would you inherently immediately think in the kind of, setup that you would play, the differences between the two?
Just resistance,
Yeah.
resistance, resistance. I mean, obviously there's bad resistance and there's good resistance, but if you're going to blow across a Mahler orchestra
Yeah.
in the upper register um, or Wagner, then you need something that will stay together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because the Kegelstadt, especially, I mean, just that opening. Oh God, it's so glorious. I always use that to test my light reads, but not light so that you can't push it. It's just that you don't need that huge volume
Uh-huh.
change that you need
Uh-huh.
in orchestra.
So when you say lighter reads, and chamber music and things like that,
More
describe
flexible, I
you
would say.
mean okay, thanks. Yeah, yeah.
More
Because
flexible.
everyone has a different perception of what light and heavy may be. So I was curious to see if that,
Yeah. More.
being a mouthpiece maker for so long, I've heard all the words you can ever imagine, and I'm always trying to find easier ways of saying certain things. And sometimes it's clarity, sometimes it's like in talking about Mahler and a big thick sound and projection and loudness. Sometimes sometimes for some people a lighter reed can make that happen too. So it just depends on structure and all that kind of stuff too. So it's interesting. So talking about um, the little, I always have my pet peeves. I'm sure you do too.
Uh,
And I'm so when I was a big sort of Family Guy watcher younger when I was younger, and there was this one episode of Family Guy where um, Peter gets on and he talks about what grinds my gears, which I thought was hilarious. So, what grinds your gears when you're teaching students? What things do you think that are obvious that sometimes people miss?
well, for me, it's the way the air goes through the instrument.
Uh
I
huh.
just, you know, 9.5 out of 9.9 students out of 10 just will not blow through the instrument correctly.
Mm.
They'll back away from places that they should be putting more air to. They put
Mm-hmm.
too much air in other places. I mean, for me, it's all about where you're directing your air. It helps or hinders every aspect of playing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as soon as I can get that through to the student, they start to sound like a clarinet player.
That's great.
I mean, it's not just crescendoing on the way down from a scale. It's about filling the notes before the note that you want to go to, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows. I know vocally. It's the note under the high note.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes that um, arrival sound right.
Yeah, no, it's great. There's so many ways one could say this, but I always felt that because of how we're dealing with the instrument, it, the tiny millisecond adjustments we're making and the things that we're trying to do spontaneously, that one has to always back up slightly before it to prepare for it. And so many times I see students do things right at the moment. And if you're there and you're doing it at the moment, you're too late.
You're too late. That's an interesting way of saying it. And I love this about teaching. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you teach a lot more than I do, um, but d- d- how do I have to say it so someone understands it?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
always
Mm-hmm.
the quest, and it's different for everybody.
It is. It is different. And I also think everyone says the same thing in their minds and translate it in different ways. And it's one of the things that's so glorious about the clarinet. Like, I think there are so many different ways of playing the clarinet and so many different sounds and so many different approaches. And I mean, to me, that's the celebration of a great instrument. And so it's really fun to hear your perspective on all of this. I mean, I've always been so impressed with your life as a musician, and it's just I don't know. It's great to hear your voice because I'm not sure a lot of people have heard you talk about the clarinet. So it's great, and they're probably saying the same thing about me too because I'm kind of a hermit too. So
Oh, are you? Well, this is great. You're doing
but it's
this.
good. Yeah, so it's good. Okay, so what grinds my gears? So there's these little things that I think are kind of obvious, but you don't think about them that way when you play the clarinet. One is, utilizing all the keys. Like they're all there. Let's use them all. And one of the ones that always kills me is, doing, F B flat major or something like that. When everyone goes to the side, they sort of like forget that's even there.
That's
You know,
right.
like this is a great key. Use it because it can come so in handy sometimes. My explanation is always, what do you get in the middle of a Scheherazade solo? And you've got water in your key. you know, things like
I
that.
was just thinking of Scheherazade.
Yeah.
Actually, I use that a lot.
Yeah, the other one, yeah, I mean, I use that one constantly. It really helps. The other one is actually, um, it's really not that brilliant of a comment, but I would say that a lot of times students tend to play, depending on where they grew up and what part of the country or world, they might play, D major, left hand or right hand, B natural, and going across the break, right? And I find a lot of times people are utilizing both sides of their body when you could just use it in you can do it in one hand. So if you're doing your Mozart and you're going across the
Oh, yeah,
you use the right hand.
exactly.
Things like that, like little things like that that can help the efficiency of the technique and after a while you get used to it and you don't even think about it, you
You
know.
don't.
Um,
Yeah.
but it definitely something like that, when someone's playing across the break and using the other hand, and you're sending a signal from the other side of your body to your brain, and you're trying to line up all these, very tiny little motions with the fingers. Anyway, stuff like that. Um,
So I have a great story about that.
oh, cool.
And Chike 4,
Okay.
which when I was in college was always my, the scherzo, never a problem. Never, never. Played it for years here. One day, couldn't play the one over the break. I couldn't do it clean. And I couldn't figure it out. I had to change sides.
Oh, interesting.
Because my brain just, something happened. I did it that 1,000,001 time.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And it broke, and I had to put it on the other side, and it was fine, but it took me a while to feel
Yeah.
comfortable with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great story. That's a,
So always try the other side if it's difficult, right?
oh
And if
yeah.
it's
Have
not working,
yeah. Yeah. Always try the other one. Yeah,
and
because we've got
all of the keys, the chromatics.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other one I was thinking about, which is something that Marcellus always talked about in those master classes, and I don't know if everyone knows that they're all in the Northwestern uh, Library Archive. You can go back and listen to all of those Marcellus master classes that he did every summer, and one of the ones that I always thought was really something that we teach all the time that I feel like maybe gets lost a little bit is dealing with the resistances of the different notes of the clarinet. So you're playing the middle C, the long C for us, and it's a resistant note. And then we move it up to the D above it, and what happens? Well, immediately the D is louder, and you know that's just part of how the acoustics of the clarinet works, and being really mindful of that volume change is something else that I think we all really work with a lot on the instrument and try to balance really well. Do you have that same experience in your own playing?
Well, I think that's that directing the air correctly
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
thing that I just get so burned up about with
Uh-huh.
really talented students,
Yeah.
because that's again part, I mean, I say, where are you putting your air? In other words, I'm assuming that we want this to be even, so you have to put it in a place that makes it sound even. If you go from C to D and D pops out,
Right.
you know then you shouldn't be pushing that hard from C to D.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's something that we are always constantly working with and trying to even out and make the clarinet as beautiful as possible.
And
Yeah,
make it do what's in your head.
yeah, putting it together.
That's the
Absolutely.
most important thing.
Yeah. Well, now that we have this sort of opportunity in our lives to sort of reshape and reevaluate what we're doing all the time on the clarinet, what are you going through right now? What philosophies and things that you're thinking about?
I think I like you. You mentioned that you get really excited to hear players whose approach is completely different.
Mm.
Maybe it's a different sound. Maybe the articulation is even different than I find. You know, the older I get, and I'm sure this is true of most things in life, you you want the essence of the thing that has attracted you.
Mm.
And that's the making of the music.
Mm-hmm.
That's the connecting one person to another. And really, as long as it's a beautiful sound, as long as it's a healthy sound, as long as it's great playing, I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me some music.
Mm-hmm.
And seriously, I do hear a lot of great players where I just think nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
They are not reaching out to me.
Mm.
Why? And I can't always explain it's not moving or not or moving. It's there's something about it being the most important thing in the world that it just saying this music is great. Don't you love it?
Yeah.
I mean, you're playing. You're like, don't you love this?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is awesome. And I don't know if it's nerves or what it is, but some people do it and some people don't.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Yeah. That's great. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we're going to move on to our questions here pretty soon, but I have to say to you, you've been such an inspiration to so many people, and it is such a pleasure to have you on the show today. And I can't wait to see you in person again. We had such a good time in Portland last summer. It's great. Yeah. So, Joel, welcome back. Let's,
Thank you.
maybe.
This has been wonderful to listen to, and I have appreciated the conversation immensely. A number of questions have come up. So, Laura, one for you. Um, what has been your most memorable trip or tour in music? Somewhere where the clarinet has taken you?
You mean a physical destination?
Yeah,
Well,
overseas, local.
oh, I have really loved um, the music festivals and the time that I'm soloing. I just love to be in motion. I love to be in different places. And when I was, oh gosh, for about 25 years, I never stopped playing. You know, as soon as the as soon as there was a week off, I was playing someplace else in the States. I haven't done a lot of international travel, although I have toured France and Italy a couple times with chamber music. And I would say the French trip, parce que je parle français, and it was very, very nice to be able to be in the country and play and be able to speak to people in their own tongue. So that was really wonderful. And I love going to Bellingham, Washington State, and staying in a place for weeks and getting to know the community. And I love it when you play something and you say something to them and they just get so excited to have a coffee with you and talk about the music. It's great.
Awesome.
All right. What are your passions outside of music? I know you have several. So, what would you like to share with everybody?
Well, the strongest passion right now has been downhill skiing. But it was something I did as a very young child before practicing all the time. And it's come back pretty easily. And I just love being outside, riding my bike, walking, hiking, love hiking, backpacking, playing in Jackson Hole for all those summers. I really got to know the Rocky Mountains. And I try every year to do about a 2 week backpacking trip, 10 days to 2 weeks. Get really dirty.
And when you're skiing or doing these passions, do you consider a lot of musical adventures? Are you thinking a lot about music, thinking about performances and about rehearsals, or is it just I'm out of the studio, I'm off stage, everything but music?
I think mostly it's a part of me. You know, really seriously, I say I'm in motion and that I'm very physical. Everything manifests itself physically with me. And when I'm skiing or hiking, there is music in my head. It's just, you know, constant. And it has to do with the motion of my body and whatever tempo comes to mind. This is something I try to tell students about phrasing and about making music. It's a physical, there's a natural physical motion. And when you see retard, you know, it's something physical that happens in the universe, like throwing a ball up and then the ball coming down to gravity or the waves. You know, I'm constantly thinking about music. So yeah.
Right? On to new music. You appreciate and certainly are a champion of new music, and I know you've been working on some things. What draws you to new music, and do you have anything to say to all of the followers and people that are watching with plans upcoming for the future?
Oh, um, I've always wanted to have a clarinet concerto, and we made that happen, sort of. There might be more coming. About 5 years ago, and Michael Gandolfi wrote a really nice piece for clarinet and orchestra. But I'm a hermit, so I have never really promoted this piece, and I would really like to do that. So I'm going to be playing it again here at the end of the year, and I've asked him to make a chamber version of it so that other people can enjoy it, because I got asked, a lot of people wanted the music for it, and I was just so busy. I didn't really promote it, so I'd really like to do that.
What advice do you have for young artists or all artists in preparing a new work, especially a concerto that was commissioned for you?
Oh gosh, talk to the composer and tell him that's unplayable. Yeah, it's great to talk as much as you can to the composer about what he's thinking. And, you know, in my case, I only had 5 weeks to learn it. That really, and we were doing a lot of other concerts, it really wasn't, it was uncomfortable. I really had to work hard. Um, it's so exciting. There's nothing more exciting than that. Well, it's all exciting, but I mean, to really know that you're the first one that ever played that is, um, you know, you sit there and say, is that really hard, or is it just hard for me? So you don't know because you never heard anybody else mess it up. Just take it slowly. Everything, take it slowly, and keep an open mind and make it yours. Make it yours. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Um, a question that was asked very early on before we launched the broadcast. You had asked Richard what's on his music stand, and he laughingly said mouthpieces or a mouthpiece. So, what's on your music stand? What are you working on now? And what are your desert island pieces? I know, obviously, the Mozart.
Oh, desert island pieces. What's on my music stand is all the solo clarinet repertoire that I've never learned, and I'm so enjoying it. I am just, oh gosh, the Roza and, well, the Stravinsky, of course, we've all done a million times. The Penderecki. I've got a couple of other ones that were actually written for me by local composers that I've never really delved into.
Okay.
So that's what, and blues.
Blues.
Because I'm really bad at it, but it's just so much fun.
So, is that what's also playing in your car or on your iPhone or your phone in general?
Pretty much, I only listen to guitar music for pleasure. I mean, just for nothing. Although now I am listening to a lot of orchestral pieces because we haven't been doing it. And but I weep. I mean, seriously, I weep when Mother Goose is on the radio, and we were supposed to play Mahler 4 this week.
Mm.
the last movement, the most beautiful little thing, and the words are saying no one, loosely translate, no one makes more beautiful music than we do right now, right here. And yeah, it's pretty sad not to be making live music. Um, my desert island, oh gosh, it's
I,
like wine. There's a different favorite piece every day.
so let's pair let's pair your favorite piece or one of your favorite pieces with one of your favorite wines. What pairing would you have?
Well, you know, one of my favorite pieces is hard for a lot of university professors because all of their students do it. But the romance of the Finzi Five Bagatelles gets me every time. It's so intimate. I can just play that by myself because it's all coloring. It's all about how you approach the note and just then a little bit here and a little bit there. It's very very intimate. So I never get tired of that movement. I could just play that over and over again.
My
And
favorite.
what wine would you pair with that?
Oh gosh, I don't think I'd want to drink wine.
My favorite is that beautiful first solo in the second movement of the Poulenc Sonata.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a great, great moment. Yeah, yeah,
So hard. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So hard not to be sharp when you come back on that.
I know.
So one of my last questions, and this is a standard question that I've seen asked so many times, and several people have already asked it. What advice would you give to a young artist coming out of college, coming out of grad school, that's preparing for auditions, that's um, wanting to earn that chair? What advice do you have for them?
uh, you better not want to do anything else with your life, and do not listen to people saying it's fixed, and don't try to guess what they want to hear.
Mm.
You have to play it your way. You have to know your way first, because if you don't have an idea of what this piece is, you have nothing to say about it. So if you play the way you play and try to play your best is always the best way, because you're there to convince them that's the way this piece goes.
Hmm.
Now, if they want it faster, slower, or whatever, then you have to be flexible. But that's the most, and I've sat on a million committees. They want you to reach out and touch them. So,
Wow, sage advice. Well, on behalf of Maury and everybody at Backun, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this broadcast and to share your knowledge and experience and wisdom with us. Richard, thank you to you as well. Really,
bye.
you're
Laura,
amazing all.
talk to you later. Great to see
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.